Great. Thank you, Eric. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this workshop. It seems like such a unique workshop in terms of what has been brought together. I think throughout the day the discussions are going to be very interesting. See if I can get it right, which button I push. So I, like one of the previous speakers, started by studying these objectives. I think it's the objectives that make this such a unique workshop. And in studying them, I had to come to, okay, what is my role? And so I decided that the main way I can help meet these objectives was to deal with this question of how does a development agency collaborate with multiple stakeholders that align food, nutrition, and agricultural research interests. And so in order to do that, I'm going to cover three areas. I'm going to give you some background on USAID, because I think it's probably important to understand the nature of that organization. I'll talk about the various ways in general that USAID partners with very diverse stakeholders around the world. And then I want to finish up by talking a bit about the Feed the Future initiative, which is in fact a global initiative dealing with food security, but it's been a particular signature activity for the United States. So first of all, USAID, that we are the lead U.S. government agency working in international development. Many U.S. agencies participate in development. It is viewed as one of the pillars of our foreign policy, international development. But USAID is viewed as the lead in developing the programs and strategies. We were founded in 1961 by then President John F. Kennedy. However, it's important to understand that the U.S. government has been involved in development activities throughout its history. Some even go back to just post-Revolutionary War period to identify ways that the United States has been involved in development. So 1961 was more of a signature moment to solidify that this is an important part of our foreign policy. So our mission, and there are several important elements in the mission. The first important word is partner. So right from the get-go, we think about partnering. And our partnering is to end extreme poverty, promote resilient democratic societies while advancing our security and prosperity. So what's important in that thinking, first of all, the partnering. Second of all, that we are trying to address poverty throughout the world, so economic growth is a key factor in our thinking. But not only are we trying to benefit other societies, in doing so, we see it as a benefit to the U.S. population. So there are altruistic motivations, but there are selfish motivations as well. And this then highlights all of the various areas that USAID works in. And I think it's important when you look at, we're going to be talking certainly about the food security and agricultural piece, but I want you to keep in mind that that's just one part of the portfolio and that these all at some point interact with each other. It's human rights and governance, economic growth and trade, education, environment, and global climate change. Global climate change is one of those cross-cutting areas, as is gender equality and women empowerment. We obviously have very robust areas in global health, water and sanitation, humanitarian assistance, which is probably what we're most known for, and then a strong focus now is the importance of technology and innovation in our programming. So this slide gives you a picture of where we work, where the little flags are shown. Those are places where you will find a USAID mission or USAID office. And what's important about understanding this slide, not only the various places where we work, but in working there, we have to develop a partnership with the host country. So USAID has its programs and priorities. It has the areas that it wants to work in, as you saw on the previous slide. But we then have to develop a country development strategy with that host government. So it's not just we come in and do things, it's how do we help meet the development objectives of that host country. And it's important to keep in mind that we don't want to be in a country forever. What the real goal in development, number one, is to work yourself out of a job. I'm told that repeatedly. I'm doing my best. Work yourself out of a job, but also at some point you want a country to move to the point where they're sustaining their own development. And I think it's important to look at the fewer numbers of flags that you see in Latin America compared to Africa and the Middle East area. And in fact, there's several countries in Latin America that are now viewed as graduated success stories, however you want to characterize it, where they've moved to a point where they're now more invested in sustaining their own development. So I do want to highlight two aspects of how we see our impact and how we deliver our impact. So these first two are sort of highlights of two areas where USAID has developed its programming. The first one is the Feed the Future, the food security and agriculture. The second one is Power Africa, bringing power to African villages where there has not been power for electricity, lights, the basic fundamental things that we take for granted. So that's more of a long-term programming where we work with host governments to implement those programs. But the other aspect of what we do is the humanitarian response, the Food for Peace initiatives, other kind of disaster response. So the first one, just as an example, is addressing the problem with Syrian refugees and the need for housing, food, various needs, education. The second one deals with the response to Ebola, that as part of the global effort to deal with Ebola, the United States Agency for International Development was very involved. Some of the money that went into Ebola is now being shifted toward the Zika virus to deal with the global challenge that's emerging in that particular area. Now, an important aspect of how we work, what I want to emphasize on this slide of how we work is the emphasis on local ownership. Certainly science, innovation, and technology is an important theme, partnerships an important theme, and being able to measure the impact that we have. But that local ownership piece, the thinking is that's how we get to sustainable development outcomes. That it's not just our coming in fixing a problem, but taking ownership at the local level. And in 2014, USAID published a framework for local systems, and which emphasizes the importance of the local knowledge about the nature of the challenges to be addressed and the barriers and opportunities for managing. And in fact, in the work that I'm involved with at USAID, which has to do with addressing the value of higher education in development, I really embraced this framework once I found it. On the finding things on the USAID website can be a challenge, and working with the staff that have developed this framework, because to me, if you think about a local system, higher education has to be a key actor within a local system, especially to get to that point of sustainability. And so I'm not going to go through all aspects of this, but I do want to emphasize point one, the importance of recognizing there is always a system, and often the challenge for us is to listen well enough to begin to understand what that local system is. And number four, the tapping into local knowledge. It's usually in that local context, and local can be defined very broadly. It can be the nation, it can be a community, it can be a region. It's in that country, in that context. But that at the local level is where there is more likely to be an understanding of what the nature of the problem is and what the true barriers are to resolving some of those issues. Okay, so There's a section on the USAID website calling Work with USAID, and it's in this section that you'll find a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about the various ways that we partner. And you'll find in that section that building partnerships is a key focus of how we work. And often those partnerships, they're meant to assure that we are engaging on the local level. So there are three ways that USAID emphasizes, three ways that a group or an individual can partner with the agency in its development work. I'm going to highlight two of these, the responding to a solicitation and building a partnership. So there are a variety of different types of organizations that we partner with. Obviously, at that top level is government organizations, the government organizations in the host country where we work, but also other donor governments that often we will come together around an initiative so that we're complementing and coordinating activity, not competing with each other. But institutions of higher education, schools and hospitals, research institutes, particularly some of the international research institutes like the CGIAR that work in agricultural research, foundations, and foundations have become such an important part of development work. If you start looking at what non-government, particularly foundations, are bringing to the table, they have far more resources than donor governments are bringing to the table. But governments still have that advantage of being able to leverage the government-to-government dialogues. A variety of different types of non-government organizations. The private sector is key, particularly since a focus is economic growth, and also faith-based organizations who often already have a presence in these communities and can be great partners to implement programs. So in thinking about all these different partners, sometimes we're partnering because they are the implementer. They are using U.S. government funding to implement a program on the ground. Sometimes they're bringing other resources to the table, their own funding, their own networks, just a variety of things that they bring to the table. And in many cases, such as the private sector, they have an interest in being able to build entrepreneurial activity within a particular region so that they can function in that region. So some of the considerations that we take into account when we're building these types of partnerships, obviously there has to be an alignment in terms of the mission, goals, and objectives. That's who we can work most effectively with. For example, when we work with a faith-based organization, we focus on the development aspect of the work, not on the proselytizing a particular religious view. So we're taking into account our priorities and missions, what the host country wants to accomplish, and then how the partner mission and objectives align with what we're trying to accomplish. I just gave an example to someone over the break. We partner with Coca-Cola. Some people would say that's horrible, but USAID and Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, one of the things that we have in common is we want clean water, and we want reliable, clean water sources in developing countries. Another aspect of partnerships is management and accountability of funds. We're taking U.S. taxpayer money and we're investing it in these countries. And we have to make sure that those funds are managed appropriately and that we can be accountable for how those funds are used. Sometimes you don't necessarily find that in the government, but sometimes the people we partner with can help to make sure that we have that management and accountability of funding. So I want to highlight on this slide, responding to a solicitation, I want to highlight a couple of ways that we partner, just in terms of different ways of thinking about what it means to put out a solicitation that's aimed at partnership. So the first, whoops, I did it. So the first one, whoops, I have to go back. Okay, so the first one I want to highlight is the Partnerships for Enhanced Engagement in Research, or the PEER program, which is actually implemented by the National Academy of Sciences in the U.S. for USAID. So in this case, what USAID is doing is investing in research scientists within the developing country. They apply and become the PI on a grant. And as a part of that grant process, they are then partnered with a scientist who has funding from one of, I think it's about 8 or 9 U.S. funding agencies, NIH, NSF, the various USDA funding agencies, NASA, NOAA, Smithsonian. I'm probably missing some, but you get the picture that the goal is to, first of all, invest in the PI and the expertise of the PI in the developing country on an issue relevant to their development, but also then to start building that collaborative network that they would have through collaboration with scientists funded with U.S. funds. The other one I want to emphasize is the Development Innovation Ventures, or DIV. This is USAID acting as a venture capital funder that we fund projects in 3 stages, so it can be the pilot stage, the second stage is more the experimental testing phase, and then the third phase, significantly more money, is the scale-up piece. So again, the mere fact that we're in a venture capital mode means we're partnering with the private sector to address a development issue, but build a business around that development issue, a solution. And then the final thing I want to highlight is building partnerships with programs that are currently funded. So we have 2 major initiatives: the Higher Education Solutions Network, which is a large network with several, most of them are U.S. universities. There's one university in McCary that deals with the Resilient African Network. So it's a variety of African schools. So the way these kind of programs work, USAID creates a cooperative agreement, a funding mechanism where it goes to in this case, higher education institution that is the prime implementer for the project. They then solicit subprime and give out subprime awards. So the partnership then are the partnerships that are created by the institutions that we fund. And in the U.S., people are always asking me, how do I get a part of it? You have to be paying attention to the solicitations that these networks put out to accomplish what their program objectives are. So the second kind of area I want to talk about in terms of building partnerships is the actual building of a partnership through different kinds of funding mechanisms or program announcement mechanisms that USAID has. And obviously we see the value of these partnerships in terms of scale. It often allows us to scale something up. Efficiency and expertise, that usually you're bringing resources into the project that help you become more efficient, and you bring the right expertise for developing the project. And also the partnership, if indeed it includes this local ownership, means we're more likely to get to sustainability of the development outcome. So there are 2 mechanisms that might be interesting to think about in terms of how we build partnerships. One is called a broad agency announcement, and the other is called an annual program statement. So with the broad agency announcement, what the agency is saying is, this area is important to us, but we don't know what to do. We're not sure what we want to put out a solicitation on. So the first phase are concept notes that are reviewed by the agency, and then from that, selecting a group to do a co-creation workshop. So the potential participants in the project become part of a co-creation and co-development of what needs to be done to address what USAID is trying to achieve. With the annual program statements, in a way we're doing a similar thing. The agency can use those for a mission to put an addendum on an annual program statement to say, okay, here's the general theme of the annual program statement. I'm looking for this specifically, and then take proposals. But it's also an opportunity for us to get unsolicited concept notes, so ideas that perhaps we haven't thought about but need to be factored in. So one of the largest and most well-known annual program statements we have right now are the Global Development Alliances, the GDAs. And what's interesting about the GDAs is these then bring in a business interest, USAID development goals, and look for where that opportunity might be. And so one of the ones that I'm most familiar with is a GDA that's in Vietnam, where it's a partnership between USAID, the Vietnamese government, the Intel Corporation, who was very interested in creating a workforce in Vietnam that they could tap into, Arizona State University's engineering program that then is partnering with Vietnamese schools to build the engineering curriculum, and they're now moving toward accreditation, international accreditation of that curriculum. So again, it's public-private in that everyone had a stake in wanting these engineering programs to be successful, and it's really having an impact, and it's grown and now includes more than just Intel. So the program that I want to finish up talking about is Feed the Future, and the first thing I do, and this is risky, I've never done it before, so you're the test case. I want to show a little video clip. And I like this video clip because it emphasizes the different kinds of voices that come into Feed the Future.
It's a great shame to all of us that we brought hunger with us into the 21st century.
No child should starve.
1 of every 4 children in the world today is stunted. It's madness. And stunting basically sentences a child then to a life of underachievement. Not only the child, but then the entire country.
For the United States citizen, it also has a direct impact on national security.
None of us are safe until all of us are safe. That's a physical issue, and it's also a nutritional issue.
A food secure world is nobody's hungry.
Hunger leads to war, and war leads to more hunger.
It's not just a problem that's over there somewhere. It's also a critical problem for us here.
We have to break that cycle and be sure we as America are seen as part of the solution to do that. Clearly we have the resources to do it if we put our minds to it.
As a leader in agriculture, the U.S. has a lot of resources for a healthy globe.
I'm proud of the research and development that the U.S. has done to help end world hunger.
Now, the U.S. government has said it's time that we invest in farmers and help people to be able to help themselves.
This is a long march.
When President Obama was elected and said in his inaugural address to poor people in poor countries, we are going to help your farms to flourish, we knew the U.S. government would have a new commitment to agriculture.
We've had great success with this initiative, with what is now known as Feed the Future.
Feed the Future program is looking to enable local farmers to improve their agricultural practices.
Public-private partnerships are critical.
That's what's really unique about Feed the Future. It just didn't do it in one silo. It looked at the whole problem holistically, and it's bringing different partners to the table to work together.
Feed the Future helps farmers become more productive.
Agriculture working together with nutrition. For so long they were separated.
When we move people out of poverty, they can afford a balanced nutrition.
We enable countries to be sustainable, to improve their agricultural productivity. That is an outcome that lives now and on into the future.
I'm proud that America is a leader in the issue around world hunger because it does require leadership.
It is about feeding the world.
We We need some positive changes. Thinking about some positive.
Oh, my first time, and it was a success. I can't believe it. So our efforts in Feed the Future are a part of a global effort. It was launched at the G20 in March of 2009, and really to address some of the declines in support for agriculture development. We had the Green Revolution, and we sort of thought that solved the problem, but we're looking at a whole different aspect of the problem now. And certainly for USAID, one of the reasons that we're very interested in this is that finding that GDP growth originating in agriculture is at least twice as effective in reducing poverty as GDP growth originating outside of agriculture. It's sort of that fundamental notion that first you have to have a food secure system, and then you can build on that to really develop in other aspects of the economy. And in looking at this, sort of what characterizes Feed the Future, I want to emphasize that it touches on things that cut across USAID programming and where you really have to have multiple stakeholders engaged. So country-owned, it's that local ownership piece of it. We partner with universities, NGOs, the host governments, the private sector, integrating nutrition into agriculture. And, well, I'll talk more about that in a moment. Empowerment of women. This is, again, cross-cutting. Climate change is cross-cutting and focusing on resilience. These are all cross-cutting themes, and the investment in agriculture allows us to integrate all of those together. There's 7 themes, and they play out in terms of these. There's climate-resistant cereals, legume productivity, nutritious and safe foods, markets and policy, sustainable intensification, human and institutional capacity development. And it's important to hear those themes to realize it's not just what's in the ground, it's seeing the entire value chain for agriculture in order to be successful. So the other thing that really characterizes Feed the Future is partnerships, and I will try to illustrate some of these partnerships. Yeah, so I'll just keep going with the next slides to illustrate the partnerships. I do want to say, in terms of the private sector, I don't have a lot of detail on the various ways we partner with the private sector, but they have been critical. And one of the areas that we work with is the SUN network, the Scaling Up Nutrition Network, which includes a private donor piece of that, not just it also includes civil engagement, business, donors, UN network, a variety of different groups. So I want to illustrate some of these partnerships. So first of all, one of the things that I think makes this program successful is that it is a whole of government agency. While USAID may have the lead, it is tapping into the expertise of agencies across the government. USDA has been a key partner in the program, but bringing in trade and treasury, commerce, thinking more broadly in terms of how do you achieve success in this area. It also has, the universities within the U.S. have been critical partners. So this is that example. I know you can't read what's on this slide. I think certainly there are a couple key important points. One is, whoops, I did it again. You see that virtually all states in the United States have some engagement in the Feed the Future initiative. So those partnerships across the U.S. and then the partnerships that they build out to achieve the goals are important. And where you see little red stars, those are the lead, the prime. So they would be an innovation lab that's created around a certain theme. There are 24 innovation labs in the U.S. And then all of the others become part of the subprime. They are part of taking on graduate students, training faculty, providing expertise, providing research input. So it really creates a very large network. And one of the ones I want to particularly call to your attention, although it's hard to see on the map, is the Tufts Innovation Lab. This is an innovation lab for nutrition, so that nutrition-sensitive agriculture is built into the thinking behind Feed the Future. And it's really recognizing that agriculture needs to be explicit about nutrition objectives and address the underlying causes of nutrition, whether it's inadequate food access, care and feeding practices, health and sanitation environments. It has to build that into its thinking. This just illustrates for you the countries where we have Feed the Future projects that are underway. The new alliance refers to a new initiative in 2012 to gain certain policy commitments and new investments in certain countries to accelerate the progress of Feed the Future. And then this slide, I'm not going to try and give you a lot of data. The point isn't just to talk about Feed the Future, but it is important to look at what will be evaluated as this program goes forward. Certainly improved agricultural productivity. That's a key part of what we're trying to accomplish. But we've also included improved use of nutrition services. That is a part of thinking about Feed the Future. And expanded markets and investments in agriculture and nutrition. So again, looking at that whole value chain in terms of how we evaluate the success of this program. And just to give you a few numbers, you know, by the last numbers I had were FY13. 7 million farmers and food producers use new technologies. The practices are in more than 4 million hectares. It's reached out to 12.5 million children with nutrition interventions, increased the value of agricultural products sold by farm households by 170 million, increased new private sector investment in agriculture. Some of the data from Ethiopia suggest an accelerated reduction of stunting in children. So again, we feel we're on the right track, and we hope that we're going to be able to sustain this kind of investment. So when I come back to my original question, how does a development agency collaborate? In a way, you could say any way we can, because those partnerships that result in local ownership really are the key to success, both in terms of meeting those local needs, addressing the challenges in a local context, but also making sure whatever investment we make turns into a sustainable development outcome. And this is, I threw this in at the last minute. It's a part of our project cycle that we're really trying to build into all of our thinking. That, you know, you begin with listening, engage, discover what are we learning from our investment, adapting, and then start the process all over again. So, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. It was a really, really interesting presentation. I have a question with respect to Feed the Future, and I'm impressed by the fact that you have so many universities in as many states as possible in the US. I'm not too sure they've covered all of them. How do you manage such an extensive partnership, and how do you measure the networks and the impact of those networks that each one of those individual universities would have?
Right, and probably the best way to look at that is to look at the annual reporting from Feed the Future. I mean, I have a copy of that report with me, and it's available on the web, as is everything available on the web. So some of it is to look at the specific measures that they're making. I gave you the 3 big buckets that they're measuring, but within each of that are very specific targets that are being measured. And you know, one way to think of USAID is it's very decentralized. So when we create a cooperative agreement with the university to be the implementer, they then take on a certain responsibility in terms of how that program is going to be run and managed. A cooperative agreement means they still have to negotiate certain things with us, but it gives them more flexibility to kind of fit into this cycle, start adapting in terms of what they learn on the ground and how they have to adjust. So I mean, the real trick would be to talk to the people from the Bureau of Food Security in terms of how they meet with the individual labs, the innovation labs. They bring some of them together. There's a reporting that they have. I mean, there is a whole process for how we interact with them.
Barbara, can you talk about partnership with COPE? I mean, I've certainly read some literature on the implementation of the taxation of sugar-sweetened beverages in Mexico, and one of the issues there is that in many remote communities in Mexico, they don't have clean drinking water, and that's one of the factors that's driving the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. So if you could speak about, I guess, some of the challenges, or perhaps how you negotiated that partnership.
I did not negotiate that partnership. Yeah. So no, I simply bring it out as something where in that focus toward clean water, it is a common goal that we have, not only with Coca-Cola, but certainly with other companies, where you have a goal toward clean water. And so how can you work with those kind of partners to meet that common goal? And I think it's a challenge that we all face. It doesn't mean you're endorsing a product, it doesn't mean you're promoting a product, but it does mean you have to think in terms of the sustainability, that if our goal is to invest in a way that leads to a sustainable outcome, so we're not having to fund it continually, we have to think about how we work with that private sector to achieve that goal. And so that's, I mean, from my perspective, that's what sits behind that kind of approach.